Okay, so let's say hello to our audience. You are listening to the Gemini Legal Podcast, focused on the California workers' compensation industry and the faithful practitioners. We are live. We have a special show at the California Applicant Attorneys Association Winter Convention here in beautiful Rancho Mirage. I am Dan Mora. I am not an attorney. I am, though, the CEO and founder of Gemini Legal, a legal discovery company in California workers' compensation. My guest is none other than past president for California Applicant Attorneys Association, Jim Butler. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Very glad to have you. Very glad to have you. So, Jim is a practitioner in Oakland and has been in the industry a long time.
32 years.
32 years, Jim. Congrats. So tell us how you started in workers' compensation.
Well, I was with a firm of 3 lawyers, and we began doing civil cases. And there were some comp cases that the office had taken in, but nobody wanted to touch them because they figured it was déclassé to have anything to do with workers' compensation. I had a varied background, and I thought, you know what? They're just people. I like helping people, so why don't I do it? And things grew from there.
Great. So how many years? 35
32.
years? 32 years. Wow. So tell us about your firm. You have you practice a little different than some other firms, so tell us about that.
Different than a lot of firms that do workers' compensation exclusively. We do something called simultaneous litigation of benefit systems. And basically, where someone gets hurt at work, we do a lot of construction site injuries because we represent the building trades members, and the unions send their cases to us. And we do the workers' compensation case. For example, I'm a certified specialist. We also do the civil case where it's available. That's a jury trial before a judge and jury. We also handle the Social Security case, the OSHA case, and the pension case. And we try and weave a blanket of recovery from those diverse funds.
So yeah, you gave me an example. Why don't you do that again? That was really good.
Well, for example, if one has a UPS driver who's driving through a green light and is hit by someone who runs a red light, that driver is at work. So they are entitled to temporary disability, medical care, permanent disability, and all the other smaller benefits that workers' comp delivers. But because he was violated, that the person who ran the red light and hit him violated his rights, they did a negligent act. What that means is he can also sue them. The worker's sole and exclusive remedy against the employer is workers' comp. There's nothing else you can get except workers' comp. We try and sue them, their case will get thrown out of court. So then begins the interplay. So usually the comp case is filed first, then the personal injury case is filed somewhere down the line after he's more or less permanent and stationary. The OSHA case is filed immediately if OSHA is called to investigate. We would file for Social Security benefits once it's clear that the injury is severe. We do a lot of very severe injuries. And then we weave those systems together. So let's take the example of that UPS driver. They get all of the benefits that I mentioned. And then when they sue the third party, the car that hit them, the workers' compensation carrier comes in with its hand out. And it says, I had to pay all these benefits. You got to pay me back from whatever you get from the car driver before you'll see penny one. And in a case where there is no fault, they're right. They're not entirely right. Where the workers' lawyer procures the money from the civil case, the workers' compensation lien has to be reduced by 40% plus a pro rata share of costs, because it's what's called a common fund, which is gotten by the civil attorney for the benefit of the insurance company. If we change those facts a little and say that when the collision occurred, the seatbelt did not work properly, either it fell off or the roller didn't work, then the employer has the blood of the injured worker on their hands. And under equity or fairness, they shouldn't profit from their own wrong. So in that circumstance, the driver's lawyer gets the third-party recovery, and they can say, no, you get nothing back because you committed an error which caused or contributed to causing the injury. So the comp carrier turns around and says, okay, well, we're going to seek credit. Credit is an offset. In theory, you're not supposed to be allowed to get both a third-party recovery and a workers' compensation recovery, but that changes where the employer is at fault. So they go into the compensation case and they say, Your Honor, we want to order granting credit against all benefits the workers do. The judge says, well, what do you think, Mr. Butler? I say, no. As a matter of fact, they are responsible for causing the injury, at least 50%. And I would call an expert to testify, and the judge would likely find that 50% of the money received by applicant, I said that a little wrong. It's not 50% of the value of the settlement. It's 50% of the entire value of the civil case, soaking wet. So if that damage to the worker is $1 million, then the employer, after a credit trial, would have to pay out $500,000 before it could see one penny back.
Gotcha. So that's unique. Yeah, and I speak to lots of lawyers, lots of people in this industry, and I would echo that. There's not a lot of people practicing this way. It seems like a very holistic approach. You're dealing with all the aspects of the legal liability. But why do you think that is so unique and most people don't practice this way?
Well, I learned it when I got started at Legal Aid, feeding and clothing and housing the indigent population in Alameda County. And every Tuesday and every Thursday, there would be a line outside of my office of people who had nothing. And I would have them in, and I'd have 15 minutes to figure out where to get them medical treatment, where to get them rent, where to get them a doctor, and where we could get medical records from a doctor. Why, based on asking him out of his conscience, could he give us copies? And I saw there was a way to keep body and soul together for these people. And I just made the transition. A lot of people find it very challenging to do all of the stuff that we do because it takes a lot of research and a lot of staying up to date on the law. That's why you'll see me here for every convention, because I don't want to miss anything. It's also a lot of work, and some people, for better or for worse, take the shortest way that they can and call that enough. And I'm just a little different.
Yeah, well, that's good for us. Good for us out here, and good for your clients.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So you've been involved in leadership, and it sounds you have this passion, this fire in your belly to right the wrongs. Why the leadership? You've chosen to put yourself out there and be a part of leadership in CAW and some other areas. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm not really sure why leadership. I have a lot of passion for what I do. When I was 17, I was hit by a guy on the wrong side of the road who knocked my teeth out, ripped my face off, ripped my leg off, and left me there, never to be seen again. So I have issues that I enjoy playing out on other people's chessboards. I guess the way working the executive part of the law started was when I was a trial lawyer in San Francisco, many years ago. And I got a reputation among my colleagues, and they elected me to go on the board, the executive board of the trial lawyers, which I did then do. So treasurer, secretary, president-elect, and president. And I liked it. Mm-hmm. It's a big challenge. To be a good leader, you have to be a really good listener, and you have to keep a cool head at all times, and your hand on the tiller has to be smooth, and your eye on the horizon has to be straight. But it became apparent to me that it was one of the talents that God gave me. So I elected to use it. Same thing in CAW. I was a foot soldier for many years. And then somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we want you. And one thing led to another.
And what do you feel characterized your presidency at CAW? What was the defining moment, or a couple defining moments in your time?
Well, that's a hard question. There were some things that stand out, some decisions that came down that year, which were really good for the applicant.
And what years, can you remind me?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was like 2011 or 12.
Okay.
That was before the reforms of 2013. And by working along with a team of other bright lawyers, what COD does is we legislate by dealing with the legislators and trying to make policy that becomes law that's good for the workers of the state. We educate, we teach each other and teach all comers what it is we know without fear that somebody's going to steal it from us. We give it freely. And we also litigate through our amicus committee, where we have been helpful in getting the courts to see the light. And I guess it is the combination of those things that brought me real pride in the year that I spent. It's a lot of work, especially when you're president. There are conference calls for 1 to 2 hours a night, 4 nights a week, and you get a little tired of that after a year or so. But it was all rewarding.
Yeah. That 11, 12, that was the beginnings, and even 12 was when SB 863 was enacted.
Yes, 12 was when 863 was enacted, and we had a hell of a time. We went to Sacramento, and we had a war room, and we did everything we could to lobby legislators. At the end, we thought that we had it locked up in committee, and they broke out, and Governor Brown came out and went around twisting arms all over the chamber, and down we went. But, one of the things about being part of this organization is even when they knock you down, you lay there on the floor and you think, what can I do next? Oh, I know what. I'll kick them in their softballs and get it back up.
I love that about you, Jim. I remember listening to you back in that time, and we have a mutual distaste for maybe the conflict of interest that happens on the opposing side, where their focus is on profit as opposed to the mandate of workers' compensation, which is to get benefits delivered.
You're right.
So How do we shed light on that? That's always been a question of
Well,
mine.
if you're relying on them having a conscience, it may be misplaced. They can spend $50 million, excuse me, at the drop of a hat. We can't do that.
Right.
All we have is what makes sense and what's right and what's fair. It takes a tremendous amount of optimism and determination to keep going back out onto the field.
Yes.
Where you got trounced last time. But what did Winston Churchill say? We shall fight them on the beach. We shall fight them in the air. We shall fight. We shall fight. We shall fight. Never surrender.
Amazing. Beautiful. Jim, so switching topics here for a second.
Yeah.
You've recently written a book of poetry.
Yes.
Did I understand that right?
That's correct.
So on your spare time, that's something that you do?
Well, I've been writing poetry for a long time.
It's a lost art.
Well,
Maybe.
I was a little ashamed of my poetry because it marked me as being very different from everybody else I knew. But about 2010, one of the things you don't know about me is I'm an art collector.
Okay.
And I buy contemporary art from California artists post-1940. And I was meeting with this artist, became friends with him, bought a couple of his paintings, Gustavo Rivera, and I showed him some of my poetry. He said, "This is amazing. You've got to publish this." And I'm like, "What? I do?"
Wow.
He said, "Yeah." So he took the time to hook me up with the publisher. The publisher read the poems. He said, "These are fabulous." I said, "Well, I commissioned 5 artists to do works of art around specific poems." He says, "Okay, that's a good beginning. Now you have this extensive collection of art, and what you got to do is pick a piece of art to go with each poem." And that took me about another 6 months. And I discovered that the relationship between art and poetry is that one is the infinite refrain of the other. And that's the name of the book, Infinite Refrain.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You are a multi-talented, faceted human being, Jim. I appreciate you.
I try.
Well, thank you so much for being on this podcast. We're
you
really
for
happy
having
to
me.
have you. You are a thought leader, and we appreciate you and all the work and the service that you've given. So
Thank you,
you.
Dan.